Will you go louder?
Come here, rude boy, boy, can you get it up? Come here, rude boy, boy, you should big enough. Take it, baby, baby, take it, yeah. Come here, rude boy, boy, can you get it up? Come here, rude boy, boy, you should big enough. Take it, baby, baby, take it, yeah. Tonight I'ma let you be the captain. Tonight I'ma let you do your thing, yeah. Tonight I'ma let you be right.
Welcome all the speakers and our participants for joining this program. Like every year, we are joining this, organizing this. This budget has been presented in the parliament in a very unprecedented situation. We all know that the economy has been badly hit by pandemic and related measures. So there is a huge demand constant recession or whatever term you can use. And there is also a kind of consensus that government needs to boost up demand. So we need some sort of expansionary fiscal policy. And indeed, people claim that yes, it has been the case. There has been several packages in the past, and in over the last 1 year, there has been about 14% more than what it was budgeted. And again, we are having an expansion of similar nature. But is it good enough? Is the expansion enough for boosting the demand and get the economy back on track? More importantly, whether we, while we see a substantial expansion in terms of fiscal deficit, so is that a measure of expansion? Because if fiscal deficit is coming at the cost of, you can say, taxation reduction, huge tax concession has been given. So is that a good idea? Has that helped? And more importantly, if we are doing deficit financing and if we're spending money on certain heads, where exactly we should have spent and where we are spending, are they good enough to boost the demand inside the country, or the way we are going to spend will actually increase more of imports and more of consumption of luxury goods? These are important issues. Now, this also brings us back to what has been the flavor of the day, Atmanirbhar Bharat and industrial policy. So what has been the lack of sources of lack of competitiveness of Indian industry? That is an important aspect to look at, whether budget has done anything on that. Now, people talked about wage rate, but many people say wage rate is not a big thing. But education, people are not skilled enough. Cost of energy, lack of adequate infrastructure. So these are issues that need to be addressed. And of course, infrastructure got attention. We see huge projects being declared. But new dedicated freight corridors have been declared. But then one can also think that some 15 years back, we announced dedicated freight corridors, two of them, Eastern and Western. 15 years down the line, we have completed just about half of that. So if we could not complete those dedicated freight corridors, announcing more, what is the guarantee that what we're trying to do will be achieved? Then, of course, health is an important issue, which has been linked to the pandemic, but also because health is important for making your labor able, efficient. Now, expectedly, the budget has mentioned health a lot many times, and finance ministers especially mentioned points about strengthening primary health center and all. But do we see, concomitant allocation in the budget, or is it that, we are spending more on rural drinking but not on health infrastructure, or we will be spending a lot of money on vaccination but not strengthening this sector at all? So these are also important issues. We have speakers for that. Informal sector is one that, of course, need good attention because pandemic and lockdown has affected hard that sector most. So have we done enough in the budget for that? And then, of course, agriculture is also a topic of the season. We all know that farmers are sitting in the borders. So, of course, everybody expected that agriculture would get serious attention in this budget. But has that been done? So that is also important issue that need to be discussed. Then one important aspect that has been highlighted is that FDI, privatization, of public assets, which was there in the last year budget also, but the target could not be achieved. Whether that itself is a good or bad idea is a different story. But if we could not do it last year, what is the guarantee that we will do this year? So are we in a situation where we might get more of deficit? And of course, importantly, that we talk about Atmanirbhar India, and we are depending so much on foreign investment. So is there some sort of mismatch? The idea is that does it gel with the concept of Atmanirbhar Bharat? These are important issues to be discussed. But lastly, I would also like to mention one point that FM talked about this budget will be historical, but PM talked about, we had many budgets, and this budget will be a kind of a sequel to that. So what exactly did we see? Did we see a historical budget, or did we see something incremental? In any case, now people say that budget has become annual ritual. Not much comes out of it because lot many decisions are taken throughout the year without budget as executive decision. So do we see this budget as really historical, or it's a series of actions? One of that, after GST has come, we know that budget doesn't take any decision on GST. It's done in GST Council. So of course that is an important. So to discuss all these issues, we have a panel of very eminent experts. We have Professor Biswajit Dhar from JNU. We have Professor Praveen Jha, also from JNU. We have Professor Rama Baru, who is eminent health experts, as is also from JNU. We have education expert Professor Govinda, who has been with NIPA earlier, but now he's with CSD as distinguished professor. We have Professor T. Huck, who is a noted agriculture expert and who has been a researcher as well as who played an important role in policy making for more than 2 decades. And we also have Dr. Ashwini Mahajan, who is the convener of Swadeshi Jagran Manch, who has been very active, the organization as well as he as an expert has been active in these economic issues, in particular Atmanirbhar Bharat, FDI and those kinds of issues. So we have a huge lined up of experts, but not last but the least, we have a chair who was president of CSD, Professor Muskund Dubey, but he has been a distinguished diplomat, an international bureaucrat, as well as an eminent education expert in his own right. So with these words and welcoming you all again, I would request Professor Dubey to take over the session. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think I will follow the following order. I shall first give the floor to those who would speak on the macroeconomic dimensions of the budget, and they can refer to particular aspects or sectors. Then after that, I will go on to those who will present the experts' view in particular area or areas, like Professor Govinda on education, Professor Rama Baru on health. But they are also free to comment generally on the budget, because this time we are not splitting the session into various groups. We are just one session because webinar lends itself to not more than 2 hours, 2.5 hours, even that is too much. So please bear in mind that confine your namaz to 10 to 12 minutes. Uh, no, no, no parallel talk, please, please. Uh, uh, and then we would have about half an hour left after the presentation, and they will then anybody can speak from the floor. So, by way of introductory remark, I'm not going to go into the details of the provisions in the budget. If need be, I may do it later. This is just to sort of formally reserve my right. But I am now going to highlight some broader aspects, the global and the national context in which the budget should be looked into. The first thing is that there is if you go through the speech of the finance minister, which I have tried to do, there is an impression that the emphasis is on privatizing institutions and establishments, one after another, and going to the extent of privatizing land also now, and then developing new institutions, new establishments on private-public mode, which really a public role gradually disappears. And so this is also a form of privatization, if one may look at it. Now, this is one aspect of it. You have a goal of earlier when the second thing is that the selling, family silver or family assets one by one. And I remember when committee on commission on disinvestment was set up under I think Mr. Ramchandra, who was also our ambassador in Brussels at that time. The idea was that you sell some enterprises and you let some languish, but the ones which are doing well, you sell in order to plow it back into the same industry to make it efficient and change and bring about structural changes. It was not meant to be added to the general revenue of the government. Now this budget makes it clear that this has become one of the main sources of the revenue of the government. Now whether this thinking has been fulfilled or not, it is a matter of discussion. As you see that in the last budget, something like 1.2 lakh rupees was expected to be realized. In the present budget, it is about 1.7 lakh crore rupees. But the realization last year was only 33,000 crores. So as C.P. Chandrasekhar in his op-ed article in the Hindu has said that this is proving to be a wishful thinking. And the targets in this area have proved very unrealistic. So if this expectation is not realized, then what the government will resort to. And this is one thing. Other thing is that if you go on selling your family silver, then in the in moments of crisis, what would you fall back on? We have seen in the case of pandemic that in UK, perhaps the entire thing had been handled by their system of public health, put in place by Anurian Bevan in 1952 in the immediate post-war year, and still continuing. Some of the most conservative prime ministers could not scrap it. because the way it has taken roots in the society and in the economy, and they have fallen back mainly on this for distributing medicines for vaccination. The U.S. it is in a mess, and so they are thinking immediately after starting the vaccination, they are thinking of sort of putting it in the private sector. Then it is a source of income, and if all this thing is disposed of, what the government would fall back on to get any project implemented, to get any source, to tap any source from where to mobilize additional resources. So this is a moot question. Second thing is that the liberal world order is has come in for criticism, not now but from the beginning of the this century, and World Bank and the IMF has accepted several of the mistakes that it has they have committed, and they have been saying last 2 decades or so that we are now no longer opposed to government intervention, but the issue is that where to intervene and where not to. They revised their position and has taken this view. Now the point is that in the overall global context of the drastic revision of the global liberal order, is India going to be the only major country still sticking to it? Or it has to look into some of the more fundamental structural and basic problems of the economy and society. If you see the program of Joe Biden, the emphasis is on removing inequality. The emphasis is on tackling racism. The emphasis is on removing discrimination from society. There is not a word of any of this thing in our budget, or even in the speeches that are being made from the very high level on economic issues. So we are really swimming against the tide in the world order, and those who sort of have given rise to this tide and unleashed it, like IMF, World Bank, Washington Consensus, quintessentially, and the countries of developed countries and some of the important countries which are coming up, they are revising. They are now thinking as to how to remove these structural problems of discrimination, both social and economic, and inequality. And we don't pay any attention to it at all. Third is that the reliance on foreign capital. Now, with kind of 70 years of experience of development, when at no stage of time foreign capital contributed more than 2 to 3% of the total investment made in our country. How can any government predicate its development in the future years on the inflow of foreign capital? And the way the figures are presented in the distorted way, there's another thing that you would discuss perhaps, is now there was a sort of half headline in newspapers that India is the second, has been able to attract second largest volume of inflow of foreign capital after China. At least we considered that China has attracted the largest amount. And our second largest was in the range of 49 million or 50 million or so. And it is lower than what we achieved only about a year or 2 years ago, when it has gone up to 60 and 65 billion dollars. And then in the pandemic year, we attracted about 49 to 50 billion dollars. And we advertised in the newspaper that, second largest in the world. Now, what this 49 billion means in the context of the, sort of massive need for resources of the country. And then to highlight it in newspapers and in the budget speech also, that some of the things that we will meet will be through the inflow of foreign private capital is neither here nor there. I mean, this doesn't mean anything. Lastly, I would say that the last 2 3 years we were riding on the anarchy and sort of violence of rules of law unleashed on the world economy and world order by Trump. Now, this is not going to be so in the coming years. The Joe Biden is going to work together with the Western countries in restoring the world order, which eminently suited their purpose, and on which we were also riding. And then we will have to be accountable against the standard of the rules that have been laid down in the World Bank, to some extent UNCTAD, IMF, and then this protectionist measures that are being adopted and being announced from time to time. We will be hard put to justify that, whether it is by way of additional subsidization of agriculture, or by way of the levy of customs duty on manufactured products. I mean, I would request Professor Biswajit Dhar to comment on it. So these are my broad comments. I would not like to comment on the how much has been reduced and how much has been increased, though I know the figures under most of the important headings, because that will come up by those who will be speaking on the subject. And lastly, before I conclude, I hope that some of you will speak on the way figures have been used in the last few years under the present government in projecting success and achievement of the government, in making provisions in the budget. Now take the health sector. You have something like, whatever 137% increase and thousands of crores of income. Now there is no doubt compared to the last budget. It is a sum total of the cost that is likely to be incurred in implementing the ongoing projects and some of the new projects which have been announced. Now, what do you compare this with? I mean, unless you had such a package in the past, and if there was such a package in the past, after 1 or 2 years, the loss of these projects, is diminished, and the government doesn't even refer to these projects, and comes out with something new which has an additional, sort of gloss. And that these are announced on appropriate occasions, but they are not comparable. And comparable could be the figures provided in the current budget as compared to the budget estimate of the last year and the actual expenditure of the last year. If you look at it in this way, then in the health sector there is even a reduction. Similarly, in education sector, there is clearly a reduction. 5,000 crores in elementary school education, and if you take Samagr Shiksha Abhiyan, which includes teachers training also, and they are about 7,000 crores. There's a reduction. So this assemblies of projects and their cost being announced as a kind of an additional investment, it is apparently misleading. And I hope that some of you will comment on that. So I shall confine myself only to this at this stage and proceed to give the floor to those who would be speaking on the particular aspects of the project or on the general macroeconomic aspects. And I think at the top of our list is Professor Vishwajit Dhar. And it is not only because I read the article which he had written in the Amal Bazar Patrika, but also I think now he's a very senior professor and he should have the first go at it. Vishwajit.
Thank you, sir. I'm really honored that you've given me the first, the opportunity to go first. It's always a pleasure to be here and share one's views. There is someone, Akhil. There is someone who's coming in, and there is this.
I don't know, sir. I have written personal.
No, this is someone's number, 227 E7 E73499. This person is coming in. I don't know who this is, but can you just send a message, please? Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah. Okay. Thank you, Akhil. No, let me start from where. Professor Dubey, made a very important point about the budget, and people's perception of the budget, that, it's an annual exercise and it should be treated as such. Now, I think one of the most important thing that people sort of often ignore is that in the absence of the planning process now, the budget is the only document we have where the government gives a holistic view as to which way it is going. So the direction of the economy, and the direction in which it wants to drive the economy, is available only from the budget. You don't have any other document or any other forum from which you can actually understand what the government wants to do with this, with the economy. And therefore, there are very important lessons here as to where the government really wants to take this economy, and what is in for the future. So I think that's the thing that needs to be recognized first and the foremost. The second thing that I would like to highlight is that if both in the economic survey and in the budget, the finance minister and the chief economic advisor, they have highlighted the problem of COVID and the COVID-induced crisis that the Indian economy has suffered from. But there is no recognition that the Indian economy, until the COVID actually struck in March, until then, for 9 consecutive quarters, the Indian economy was on a slowdown. In fact, one should go even further back, because from 2016-17, in one of the quarters, the growth rate was 8.1%. From then, it has been a downturn, sort of a downward hill. In between, there was a blip where it went up to 7% plus, and then it has been, sort of 9 continuous quarters where there's been this down. So the point that we have all been making for the past, 9 months, 10 months, is that, there are structural infirmities that the Indian economy suffers from. And the most important of these is, what Professor Dubey was also mentioning, is a severe demand constraint that we are experiencing. So, Praveen, I'm sure will elaborate on this further. The state of the labor market gives sort of telltale signs as to what is really happening to the state of demand. And and uh, and the point that I would like to make at the outset is that without seriously looking at stimulating demand, Indian economy is not going to go anywhere. And this is clear to everyone. I think the government has been trying to stimulate the economy through completely wrong means. For instance, in 2019, it went and offered huge tax concessions to the corporates. The corporation tax was brought down. Ostensibly, the message was that we are trying to come down to the international levels. In Indian, the effective tax rate is far too high. And we are coming down to the globally acceptable levels. But the point that is often glossed over, and this is where I think I'd like to highlight the point that Professor Dubey also has been making, that the way the numbers have been presented, and
No, that's
Hey, it's a request to all the audience. Please keep your microphone off. It's a great disturbance to the speakers. I have been writing it continuously.
Why don't you, as an administrator, mute all the microphones? You can mute all the microphones, and only the speaker will switch on the microphone.
yeah, I think you should do that. And yeah,
Mute all of them, and you can really the speaker will switch on.
Uh, Professor Dhar, can you unmute yourself now? Just please check if you can unmute.
yeah, all right. Can you hear me?
Yeah. This is all right.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you are
Okay,
audible.
okay, thank you. So the way these numbers have been presented, and the fact of the matter is that there have been huge concessions that have been given to the corporates, left, right, and center. And each year we have been looking at these numbers of revenue foregone, which the government has been presenting pretty diligently. I think it was first introduced in 2005 by UPA. Dr. Manmohan Singh's government had introduced it, and every year we have been looking with a great deal of unease, the kind of concessions that have been given. So if you look at the concessions that have been given to the corporates, and then try to understand what the tax rates are, you will get to understand the reality that the corporates have been severely undertaxed, and opportunities for taxing the constituency that needs to be taxed is repeatedly being sort of given a go by. Now, another important aspect, and I'll just focus a bit on the resource mobilization part, because staying on this issue of corporate taxation, again in this document on revenue foregone, there is a table that the government gives, very interesting table. Many people actually miss that table. It's the first table in this annexure, which gives the corporate, the details of the corporates which have been filing e-returns, and there are about more than 8 lakh companies. And out of these 8 lakh companies, we find that around 45% of these companies have declared either losses, or they declared that they're not making any profit. So these companies are actually going scot-free. So there is no tax on them. And if you look at if you consider the companies which are declaring profits of 500 crores or more, out of 8 lakh companies, this number is only 424. Now, this is absolutely unbelievable that, in a country like India, we have these big corporate entities here. that 500 crores or more is being made by only 424 companies. So I think, there is this kind of you know, I'm almost compelled to say that there is this deliberate tendency to ignore those who should be taxed, and therefore the revenue side looks really thin. So in that context, all these discussion about the fact that this budget has stimulated the economy a great deal by just looking at the deficit, which the budget deficit, that the fiscal deficit that has been announced. This, I think, is barking up is a wrong tree completely. It doesn't give a real picture at all. Now, I was talking about this document on revenue foregone, but interestingly, in this budget, this document has actually gone missing. What has been included is last year's document with a bit of updating of the numbers. So we actually don't know. We are not up to speed as to what has happened. Last 2 years on the tax concession. So the corporate tax break that was given, 1.5 years back, the real impact of it in terms of what we are talking about, the ability of the government to tax these corporates, that is not available to us. So I think there is a serious lacuna there in the budget. Now the revenue accruals really tell us another story, and this is that the projections for 2021-22 show that these projections are actually lower than the budget estimates of 2021. So there's another thing very clear, that according to the government, despite what the CA had mentioned about this V-shaped recovery and Indian economy coming back to normal in 2021-22. Now the government's own estimates about the tax collections tell us that this is not going to be normal. We'll still be below the pandemic level, and therefore it was imperative for the government to have done much more in terms of stimulating the economy. And why was this more important? Because what we have seen from the government is that as compared to other G20 countries, its peers, the fiscal stimulus provided by India was one of the lowest. So IMF tells us that the fiscal stimulus was only 3.1% of the GDP. The 20% of GDP economic package which was talked about was and we also did our calculations, had a lot of other things, but it was not the fiscal stimulus which could have actually stimulated demand if it was, of course, if it was used in a particular in the right kind of a manner, and that has to be emphasized, because fiscal policy on its own is not the solution. We have to put the money where the mouths are, where the needs are, and what we find is that this budget and scheme after scheme, wherever there was a need to put in the funds in order to stimulate demand, that opportunity has been sort of missed. So let me give one or two examples, and I'm sure other colleagues will elaborate on them further. The Narega spending, for instance. The good news. There's a good news and a bad news. The good news is that in the pandemic times, spending actually had gone up. This is what the revised estimates tell us. But the proposed figures show a sharp decline from the increase that was made in the past several months. So which again tells a story that the government thinks that this is only a pandemic-induced crisis. There is no structural problem. and therefore, they think that, the moment, we declare that we are free from COVID, everything is going to come back to normal. And again, as I said, ignoring the fact that there were structural deficiencies that the economy was suffering from. And here again, there's been a lot of discussion or a lot of talk about investing in infrastructure. Now, all these announcements that have been made are in the big infrastructure projects, but in the rural areas, in the infrastructure that would have really helped agriculture to overcome the crisis that it is facing, and especially in times like this when there is this, the agitation that we are seeing. Proper focus on Narega could have actually brought the focus back on investment that agriculture needs. So I think it's a double whammy. Bringing down the spending on Narega is a double whammy. Is going to hit the economy twice. I also wanted to, there are lots of things to say, but I know in the interest of time, I'll just focus on two things that again Professor Dubey had very rightly focused on. One is this whole thing of foreign borrowing. And if you look at the foreign borrowing, external assistance, the number that has been given, this is a historically high level. It's reached a historically high level of 91,000 crores. This is what is being proposed in the revised estimates, and of course, this shows 21-22 figure shows a decline. But I think with the government not really intending to tax those who should be taxed and relying on borrowing, including external borrowing, this is something that is a serious problem. On privatization, Professor Dubey quite rightly said that IMF has actually been emphasizing a lot on the importance of state-owned enterprises, and in their recent fiscal monitors, they have been actually giving this evidence that since the economic downturn of 2008, there has been a spurt in reliance on state-owned enterprises in the West, and they have become major drivers in many of the Western economies. Contrary to that kind of experience that we are seeing from the Western countries, India is downsizing its state-owned enterprises, and most of them are on the block now. And I think what the government intends to do is really to ensure that that all these enterprises are phased out. They're put into private hands, and that, I think, that is the ultimate objective with which the government is moving forward. Now, it's also interesting that the FDI numbers that the government is talking about, and this discussion that India has been attracting a whole huge volume of FDI, doesn't really tell another story, which is that much of this FDI has come in through selling existing enterprises. So if you look at the operations of Reliance and the extent to which they have sold their shares to foreign companies, you can really understand the situation. So the whole scenario that is turning out in this country is that you have the government which is now selling its own enterprises to the corporates. The corporates are selling their critical strategic shares to foreign companies. So in which direction is this economy going? That is a big question that must be asked. Dubey Sahab also asked me to respond on this whole question of lowering of increase in customs duties and this whole Atmanirbhar Bharat. I've been taking this position that is this Atmanirbhar Bharat, this kind of self-reliance at this point in time is not really feasible, nor is it desirable. We have to be very strategic in terms of developing our industries. A general kind of clarion call that we are actually becoming inward looking is not something that is desirable for a country of India's size, a country which has so much of engagement with the global economy. And going forward, I hope the government actually reviews its stance that it has taken now. I'm sure that in the coming months we are going to see a wholesale revision of customs duties. That's what the finance minister has promised. But I hope we don't become inward looking to such an extent that it starts hurting the economy in the longer run. So these were some of the sort of scattered thoughts that I had the time that I could use here. And thank you for your attention.
सर एक बार आप अपना माइक अनम्यूट कर लीजिए।
हाँ, मैंने कर दिया मैंने।
नहीं, मैं प्रोफेसर दुबे को कह रहा हूँ, उनका माइक बंद है।
Can you hear me now?
हाँ जी, अब आवाज आ रही है सर।
So one point is that the size of the rescue package, the government claimed even in the first package that it was 20% of the GNP. And if you add the three packages together, then it could very well go up to 30% or 40% of the GNP. And as opposed to that, you have the figure of 2.5 to 3% mentioned by Vishwajit. But I have read an article by Nagaraj from Trivandrum, where he said it is just 1%. The real estate package is just 1% of the GNP. And whenever it involved a large-scale transfer of funds to the poor, the distressed, etc., there is a ceiling being put on that. And Manrega is one striking example of how it is being brought down. And the second thing is that on the whole question of, the restoring the rule of law in the field of trade, flow of capital, and sort of restoring back the world order, which was given a goodbye by Trump, and as I said, that we rode on the crest of that. We cannot, I think there will be a strong bid to restore it in the form in which it existed. And we cannot oppose that. We have been a party to it in the past negotiations. It is very difficult to sell the point that we are in favor of the continuing chaos and violation of rule of law. So if the new US administration, along with the Europeans, take a view that they will restore it as it prevailed before Trump, we have to be seen as one of the leading powers trying to bring that about. But at the same time, we know that this world order have built-in elements of discrimination against us. And we have opposed it from the 60s. And I have been personally a part of that opposition. 20, 30 years I've done it in my career. And the new laws that have been framed under the Uruguay round and proposed by the developed countries from time to time involving other flows, we have been opposed to that. So it is a very delicate task of joining the new US administration and European countries to restore the world order that existed 3-4 years ago. And at the same time, making the point of view that this must be reformed. I mean, we have some proposals on the table, like recently that, the vaccination for the coronavirus should not be subjected to IPR regime. And no company could claim IPR on that thing. It will be free for utilization by all the countries of the world. This proposal has not been accepted. US administration, past administration, and I don't think that the present administration is going to accept that. But we have one or two proposals we have made. We have been making it from time to time, right from the beginning. It's a very delicate task of restoring an inequitable, discriminatory world order, which existed before. And while doing so, continuing our past role of bringing about equality in it. And I don't know to what extent the government is aware of this delicate task, or they just want to take an opportunistic view that whenever there is an opportunity we will violate, and we will forget about long-term restructuring. We are not so much concerned about the shape of the world order to emerge 10 years, 20 years hence. It is not, it is not for India to think about, and we go on claiming that we are making contribution in this area, in that area, but we have no structured, orderly view of how things can be reordered. And so I've just put across this point of view. Sorry for taking time in between. Now I give the floor now to Professor Praveen Jha to speak. Professor Jha.
Thank you very much, sir. Professor Dubey, Professor Nanda, all fellow panelists, my greetings again to all of you, and it is indeed a pleasure to be part of this conversation. I think a number of very, very important points have been made by Professor Dubey, Professor Nanda, and Professor Dhar, and I'll just build on some of those things largely in a macro context without getting into the nitty-gritty of the sectoral issues. We can get into some of those subsequently if there is a clarification and question and so on. Now, the first point that I would like to underscore is, and which has already been said, that our macroeconomic context is in a complete mess, both internally and increasingly externally. Now, if you look at the standard indicators, very standard indicators, GDP growth, as was mentioned, we have been for quite a while on a downslide. Before the pandemic, 9 quarters, as was mentioned by Bishwajit, and then subsequently, things have been much worse, as we know. In any case, even that a pre-pandemic year growth rate has been revised, as you know, it is brought down from 4.2 to 4 now. If we look at far more important indicators, GDP growth is something which is not the most important indicator in my understanding and so on. What is far more important is to look at, for instance, per capita consumption, right? It is to look at what is happening to employment and so on. Now, I'll mention just these two. If we go by the NSS estimates and so on, 11, 12, and subsequently 17, 18, per capita consumption in rural India declined by 9 percentage points. Now, this is well known. But this is the context which we need to keep in very sharp view if we have to make any progress in terms of policy management and so on. This is unprecedented in independent India. This has never happened. Per capita consumption over a period of a quinquennium or more, 5-6 years, going down by that order. And it happened across deciles. Topmost decile to bottommost decile, each one of these. And this is amazing, right? If we look at unemployment, again, a great deal has been written and spoken about it. We really are talking of unprecedented crisis in terms of unemployment. I mean, everyone knows this figure of in almost half a century or so, before the pandemic, we were already at the highest, and then subsequently, we may sort of quibble over the exact figures and so on. Yeah, what exactly is, for a variety of reasons, there is a lot of controversy there, but the fact is that pandemic could have only worsened it. And there is no escape out of that. If we look at, for instance, credit flow, almost every agency is telling you that we are in a terrible spot, and possibly the worst spot in more than half a century, 50 to 60 years. Right? If we talk of investment, over again more than a decade, yeah, and so on. So if we look at the macro indicators, very standard macro indicators, it is so evident. It should be very clear to a class 5, 7, 8 child that we are in a complete mess. Now, why is it that this recognition is not there? Why is this very elementary kind of cognition is not there? What do we see? On the contrary, this massive back thumping, massive kind of, cheering one's own performance. Now, unless we start with this very basic thing that, look, things may be bad, let's try and address these. And these are not only because of the pandemic, but a whole lot of structural issues. The context is there. And how do we deal with that? That elementary honesty is something which certainly is not part of this regime. In fact, I do not know of and cannot think of any government anywhere in the world. I mean, I'm not only talking of preceding governments in India, which has succeeded so much in disregarding the facts, manufacturing lies. It's just amazing. I mean, the scale of it, right? One particular figure regarding fiscal stimulus was mentioned earlier, right? Now, of course, by several economists who have been very critical of this 20% of GDP figure, we know, and almost every agency in the world put it between 1 and 3%. That has been the range. We can again quibble over what exactly should go in there and so on and so forth. But again, something so elementary and so basic, a class 10 student of economics knows that. You do not collapse the fiscal and the monetary and talk of the fiscal. It was so basic. Who figure continuously has been harped on, as Professor Dubey mentioned, that now they are saying almost 30%. Yeah, if you look at that, interestingly, the economic survey which was tabled, as it happens, that itself makes a correction in that and puts the figure around 2% of GDP. Now, I'm not sure whether his job is on the line, whether the finance minister has and the prime minister has looked at that figure, right? That actually the fiscal stimulus was much less than what has been talked about and so on. So this is the first point I wanted to highlight. The context being in a complete mess, endless manufacturing of lies. It's like, there's as if no tomorrow in terms of kind of figuring out new ways of lying and so on. We are trapped in that kind of context. So that's the first point. Yeah. On GDP, etc., whether it would be 22, 23, 24, again, there are lots of economists. Incidentally, Geeta Gopinathan, who was here, she probably is of the view, officially IMF view that possibly it would be 25, 26. By then this recovery kind of would be in on track, so to say. Right? If you look at many economists outside the policy spokespersons of the government, they are saying that actually the contraction might be much higher. I mean, you have sort of those who are thinking in terms of well above 10% in this fiscal to about 7.5%, which is the government figure and so on. So all these figures, and as it happens, given the very terrible truth that the data agencies, our statistical systems have been so massively messed up, it becomes very difficult to sort of swear by any particular number. So that's the other, Professor Dubey rightly highlighted, the challenge of assaulting institutions. And one of the biggest assaults, I don't know whether to call it biggest assault. I mean, everything has been assaulted so badly that there should be no hierarchy in terms of the degree of assault, maybe in this conversation. But it just becomes so difficult, right? Coming specifically to the budget, then this whole claim, which was repeated by the finance minister following on the economic survey, spend. Just start looking at the numbers. What spend? Where have you spent? Right? Now, it is indeed the case that in terms of the overall revised estimate, yes, things have increased, etc. Yeah, but once we start making sense of that, for instance, something which was supposed to be a different methodology, right? And now that you account for, I'm referring to FCI, and now you say that, this is something which should be accounted for as it happens from this year, and as regards the revised estimate as well, suddenly, the numbers change. So in terms of fiscal expansion, it becomes a trickery, right? It is acknowledging a fiscal deficit, and rightly so. That limited transparency is most welcome, right? But, that essentially then tells you that it's something which is not really a real expansion anywhere, right? So this increased sort of, amount accounted for now for FCI and so on, and that is, and then consequently, various figures relating to food security and so on will come into serious question, as has been pointed out by a number of experts in the last couple of days and so on. Right? So the revised revenue, it sort of goes up to almost 34 lakh crores. Right? And likewise, the expenditure also kind of increases somewhat. But if you look at the overall revenue situation, what is the kind of downfall that we are talking about? In the year 2018-19, it was already from the budget estimate to the revised, it was already 1,90,776 crores. In the year 2019-20, it was 297,772 crores, almost 3 lakh crores. Right? This year, it's already more than 4 lakh crores and so on. Yeah? And it's only the revised estimate. We don't quite know what the final figure would be, etc. That's the kind of challenge in terms of fiscal space, which the country has to, and the policymakers have to come to terms with. That we are in a very, very difficult kind of fiscal space sort of context. And why has that happened? It has happened precisely for the reasons which were highlighted by Professor Dubey, Professor Nanda, and Professor Dhol. Right? I mean, business as usual is not going to be helping policy making. Giving concessions to the corporate sectors, fudging of figures there, etc., and allowing them to go scot-free and so on, and more of the same. Where do you get the resources then? Where will the resources come from? Right? And acknowledging this increased fiscal deficit is perfectly fine, and I think it's a good thing where sort of at least an intent has been conveyed that, look, we are not too worried about fiscal deficit. Right? That point is well taken. But the whole question of getting the resources in place. Where do we get these from? Now, there, the most important point, the most important strategy seems to be something which is already massively discredited, highly controversial: sell more and more of India. No, like Khelo India, it has become Cello India. I mean, this is amazing. As was pointed out by Professor Dubey, I mean, how can you sort of keep following this track, which raises so many questions? The same government, or same party, which was earlier outside the government and so on, what was its tune? What was it saying? That, look, I mean, fortunately we have Ashwini Mahajan, Dr. Mahajan, who is part of this Swadeshi Jagran Manch. He will probably tell us more about it, that how livid this particular political formation was about selling anything. And what happens now? So that putting on the fast track further, the amount 1.75 lakh crores has already been mentioned. We know that 2018 it was Air India had been put on the block. Nothing has happened. There are lots of problems. So in any case, hoping that through this investment we will get more resources is in any case questionable, apart from the fact that this is probably not the best strategy. Yeah, you have to be very strategic, and Professor Dubey mentioned a particular committee and how to go about it. Nothing is even acknowledged in terms of official strategy of disinvestment in that sense. Any kind of problems and what could be a better way, etc., etc. Then borrowing. Now, borrowing is the other big thing, but again, it has its challenges, etc. Right? We can get into very difficult situation. And it seems as if there is a kind of a zero recognition of the challenges associated with that. Of course, hoping that money will come. But as Professor Dhar has already mentioned, I mean, the way this money is coming and what kind of things and basically acquiring things here, etc., does that take us any further? So lots of these sort of issues. So basic point relating to the second point that I was trying to make is that in terms of a fiscal strategy, in terms of an overall budgetary strategy, resource mobilization strategy, it has been stuck in a business as usual mode. It is, if anything, moving towards something which is even more worrisome: accelerated sale of public entities and so on, market borrowings of the kind that is being talked about and so on. Now, let me very quickly come to the so-called, the other side, the expenditure side and so on. For lack of time, I'll just take a couple of minutes and, try and highlight a few things. You see, one of the easiest thing to do in every budget as regards announcing expenditure claims is to talk of infrastructure. Nobody holds you accountable for that after. I mean, I think some 5-6 years ago, there was this talk of setting up, let's say, AIMS in Darbhanga. What happened to that? That got repeated again in the election campaign when Bihar was going through that process. Right? Lots of things which have been announced. Many of these had been announced earlier. We have had a long history of it. Late Jaswant Singh talking of 60 lakh crores spending on infrastructure, and that is when things started changing. I mean, it's basically around that time that this kind of bombastic claims of how we are spending massively on infrastructure, right? And then sort of claiming that that will revive the economy. Much of it doesn't happen. To the extent that it happens, it basically is addressed to some sort of particular segments and friends and family who are dealing with those kinds of infrastructure programs and so on. Right, so it again needs to be examined very, very carefully as regards this whole question of those areas, those sectors which could have given a decent push to demand. Each one of those has been squeezed further. Rural economy, MSMEs, I mean, we are talking of numbers, 70%, 80% have gone under the sea. Look at All India Manufacturers Organization. Mr. Raghunathan, who keeps giving you these figures almost on a daily basis, right? Two biggest components of what are we doing to them? Nothing. So any serious addressing of the demand challenge, the demand question, is nowhere in the horizon. It is basically hoping that it will happen. I mean, it's good to be an optimist, but then to be an optimist, at least there should be some elementary reasons, some elementary policy interventions and so on. And very last word, I sort of mentioned that there has been some improvement in transparency in terms of, let's say, taking care of some off-budget items which were not shown earlier, and that's a good thing. But as was pointed out, if you look at the health sector and what has been said, it's complete opacity. It's giving up on that transparency. What have you done? Basically, even the Finance Commission allocations have been added in that. What kind of, I mean, can we at least expect some honesty in budget making processes? Yeah. Something which is over a period of 5 years, you suddenly add that and you do other things, you merge schemes and so on. I'm sure Professor Rama Baru will give us lots of details and so on. But it is not confined only to the health. You read the fine print, this has happened across sectors. No accountability. Everything is fuzzy. People were claiming that, fantastic, much more transparent and so on. No. In fact, it has ended up and ended us in a context where that transparency has been seriously compromised. I think I have taken more time than I should have. My apologies, sir, Professor Dubey, for it, in case I have overshot too much. Thank you for your attention. I would love to respond to anything that participants and others may want to raise. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now the next speaker is Mr. Ashwini Mahajan. He will also be speaking on the sort of general remarks on the budget and on the macroeconomic aspect and anything else, just keeping in mind the time constraint that all of us have. Professor Mahajan.
Thank you, respected Muskan Dubey ji. It's really an honor to be on the panel headed by you, Professor Vishwajit Dhar, Professor Praveen Jha, Professor Nityanand ji, Professor Rama Baru, Professor Govinda, Professor T. Haq, and the convener of today's panel discussion, Dr. Akhil. It's really an honor to be here with you. Frankly speaking, I will not be so critical. Can you hear me?
Yes, we are hearing you.
Okay.
You are audible.
Yeah. So, frankly speaking, I will not be so critical about the budget as Professor Praveen Jha. But definitely there are points I would like to make about the budget. First and foremost, I would appreciate this budget on one count, that this budget is providing more of capital expenditure than the previous budgets. We have seen in the past the capital expenditure had been coming down and down, and but what is appreciable about the government's expenditure, in the last budget they budgeted for 4.1 lakh crores for capital expenditure, which actually went up to 4.39 in the revised estimates, and the fiscal 21-22, this figure is going to be 5.454 lakh crores. So this is something I would appreciate about the budget. Second thing which is appreciable about the budget is an increased spending on the health, 137% increase. And as a student of economics, Professor Praveen Jhaji and Professor Bishnujit Dharji would agree with me that over the years, our overall social expenditure, the expenditure on the social sectors, has remained almost stagnant. And individually, also we see whether education or health or others, or say minority affairs or SC/ST or others. So we overall the figure used to be, as I write in my book, about 10% they budget for in the total budget, and actually it comes to 9.3, 9.2, 9.5% over the years I have found. But I was happy to see a 137% hike in the health budget. No doubt, this year's budget has been made in under special situations, and therefore, obviously, even nobody has, including this panel, has criticized this budget on the count of huge fiscal deficit of the in the revised estimates to 9.5% of the GDP, and the budget estimates of 6.8% of the GDP. Nobody is raising questions on that. And there are some of these good things about the budget. I just because before criticizing anything, we must appreciate the good points. And as you are all aware that we have a different point of view on the disinvestment and on FDI. When it comes to FDI, especially in the finance sector, whether it is banks or it is insurance sector, we had been opposing it. When during NDA 1, the government was deciding to introduce FDI in insurance to 26%. At that point of time, we opposed it tooth and nail, and then at that point, the government said that we are introducing 26% under the parliamentary resolution, that it will not be raised. At that point of time also we said that once we are introducing it, ultimately it will be raised, and that happened. It was raised to 49% in the previous regime, and now it is increased to 74%. This is unfortunate because whether it is banks or financial institutions like insurance, this is in a way would be leading to the greater dominance of the foreign players on our domestic savings and our domestic finance, which is in no way going to help the country. Second thing is about the disinvestment. Disinvestment we had been opposed to, not for the reason that we are opposed to disinvestment. We are opposed to the manner in which the disinvestment is being carried out. We are of the view that it doesn't make any difference if me and or Mr. Dhar or Praveen Jha owns the shares of the public sector companies or the government owns it. But I would definitely object to if the company is sold in wholesale to Reliance or Tata, to anybody. If it leads to more of concentration of economic power, if it leads to more of monopoly, then it is definitely objectionable. So we opposed the disinvestment of Air India, but at the same time we suggested that it's the time to revive Air India, and after the revival, you can bring out IPOs and sell the shares on the same lines as was done by British Airways in 1987. About other disinvestments, again, our press release also had said that we are opposed to BPCL disinvestment, we are opposed to the Bharat Earth Movers Limited disinvestment, and several others, including the banks and insurance company. Now the question is that what should be done on this investment front? So this is neither in the interest of the country nor in the interest of this government as well to go in for the strategic disinvestment, as they are saying. In the first 6 years, first 5-6 years, this government chose not to make use of strategic disinvestment, and they actually went for equity disinvestment. Nobody objected to that. But strategic disinvestment is something which is very much objectionable, and for that we had raised our voice, and we will be raising our voice further. Now when it comes to monetization of the infrastructure assets, roads, airports, railways, again, we will have to ensure that through this monetization process, are we going to increase the monopolies? Are we going to raise the user charges in airports, as we have done in case of Delhi and Mumbai airport, especially Delhi airport? Delhi airport has become the costliest airport in the world. So that is something which we must avoid. Regarding monetization, I think the best policy would be to pool all these assets in one basket and make it a company, distribute these shares. The whole country would like to buy. Me and you will like to buy the shares of that company, because infrastructure is the sector which is giving us a lot of revenue. So why lose that revenue? But at the same time, everybody would appreciate this point, that we need more and more money, more and more finance to fund the infrastructure sector, which the country doesn't have. Either you go for FDI, which we are again opposed to, or we go to the sovereign borrowing, again, which is in a way suicidal. So the way through which we can fund our infrastructure is, we have to find novel ways to fund our infrastructure, but monetization by selling it off to the corporates, as we have done in case of airports, being sold to Adani or any other corporate house. I think this is not a very advisable policy. Last thing, I am so very happy about this budget. At least after so many years of destructing the long-term financial institutions, like we had after the independence, we had developed many long-term financial organizations, and they had helped the need for long-term finance, maybe IDBI, even IFCI, ICICI, but they ultimately they were converted into the banks, and they went into the private hands. At least now the government has risen to the occasion that yes, we need long-term finance, and that development financial institution, the government has provided for the equity, seed equity of 20,000 crores, and hoping that it will become a corpus of 5 lakh crores in the matter of next 3 to 5 years. I think I had these comments to be made on the budget. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mahajan. I think you have made some very important points clearly and precisely, and this will be reflected in the outcome of our discussion that we will bring out. Now, I think going to the sectors, I should first take up the sector which is a subject of much discussion in the country today, the agriculture and farmers. So, Professor Haq, I give you the floor.
Before Dr. Haq starts, I would like to mention that Professor Ashwini Mahajan has to leave us in between because he has some important meeting in Delhi University to attend.
Thank you very much, really, for accommodating us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Professor Haq.
Thank you, sir. I think I did not unmute it, so I think now it is okay, hopefully. This year, I think I don't have much because it does not look very spicy this year, at least on agriculture. Well, at least so far, I was very happy that something was substantial was there, but this year I don't see much. But anyway, I must say that there was a general expectation that the budgetary allocation for agriculture and rural development this year it will be enhanced for 2-3 reasons. One is, of course, this farmers' agitation. At least government should have done something to satisfy them to contain the agitation. And I must say that this agitation is not merely due to their protest against the new farm laws. Actually, it is rooted in some kind of farm crisis that is there in the country. As you know, the recent financial inclusion survey by NABARD shows the average monthly income of an agricultural household in the country is only rupees 8,932 rupees. And in the case of states like Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, Odisha, and some of these states, it is even less than 7,500. In case of Bihar, UP, it is the lowest, 6,600 rupees. So, and nearly 40% of the farmers today still depend on private moneylenders for loan. They don't get institutional loan, whether cooperatives or banks. And the average rate of interest of institutional and non-institutional sources is 35% per annum. In some cases, it goes up to 60% also. So once these people borrow from some such sources at such high rate of interest, there is no way then they can ever be out of the poverty trap or debt trap. This is a real situation in the country today. And apart from that, what the government did in the past few years, they said farmers' income will be, real income will be doubled by 2022. And this year is the last year from that point of view, in the sense, based on whatever they do, some kind of adjustment and all that in this year's budget, probably some improvement could have taken place next year to reflect that there is some increase in the income of the farmers. But that is not going to happen. For another reason is that in the last 6 years, from 2015 to till today, if you see the average prices, that is farm harvest prices or wholesale prices, it has declined like anything. In the sense, early 6 years period and the recent 6 years period, if you see, earlier it used to be the average rate of wholesale prices, the growth used to be 6 to 10% in the case of several agricultural commodities. Currently, it is only 2% or so. So farmers are really in deep distress, and nobody recognizes this fact, whether the government or even the general people living in urban areas. That is the problem. Only yesterday I was buying some vegetables in Safal. Safal sells cauliflower at rupees 9 a kilo. And in order to grow one or produce 1 kilo of cauliflower, you will know the kind of problems, not only fertilizer and pesticides and other things, but even the kind of labor that they have to put. Even the labor cost is not covered by this. In the case of most of the crops, that is the kind of situation. So that is one reason why for the last few years they were demanding legal guarantee for minimum support prices for all commodities, not just rice and wheat, for all agricultural commodities. It has not been properly conceptualized or put in a frame that should have been the case, but that is the real problem. So after that, I think I will say, in view of this, we thought that this government will do something in this budget to address some of these things, and in terms of either announcement of schemes or giving higher allocation. Unfortunately, this has not happened. If you look at the budgetary allocation for agriculture and allied activities, it has come down even nominally from rupees 1,54,775 crore in the budget estimates of 2020 and 21 to 1,48,300 crore. That means quite substantially, I should say, this year. Although, and even if you see the revised estimates of last year, it was 1,45,355 crore. That means by about 10,000 crores, has been slashed down in the budget of agriculture and allied activities. Instead of increasing, this has come down. So, but what is significant in the present context is that even what was originally allocated for agriculture and allied activities last year, it has also come down in the revised estimate of nearly, as I said, by rupees 10,000 crore. The allocation for rural development seems to have been increased to some extent from 1,44,817 crore in 2021 to rupees 1,94,633 crore in the estimates of this year. But it remains lower than the revised estimate of last year. Actual expenditure was much more last year than what was budgeted initially. But then this year's budget estimates should have been really based on the revised estimates, because there are several things that need to be done in the rural areas for, the kind of demand creation that you are talking of through income generation and all that. That is not taking place. That is not going to take place. Last year, at least, there was some effort to maintain high level of expenditure for Manrega and some other schemes, with PM Gram Sadak and PM Awas Yojana and all that. But this year, I think this does not seem to be there. Scheme-wise, I think if we see some of the schemes that very important schemes like PM Kisan Samman Nidhi Yojana, I think last year it was allocated at 75,000 crores of rupees. In fact, that was the real kind of additionality in the agriculture sector in the last few years. In fact, earlier it used to be more or less constant in real terms, but last year 75,000 crores was the budget that was put for this. But in the revised estimates, it came down to only 65,000 crores. And this year also it has been put at that level. So that means there is no increase at all. Even for, in fact, everybody was thinking that this is too little. At least if you are talking of pumping money into the agriculture and rural sector in the hands of the poor people in order to boost consumption demand, which can help revive the economy through multiplier effect, this has not come about. Because this was a very important kind of scheme from that angle. Then similarly, as all of us know, agriculture is becoming a very risky kind of occupation day by day for various regions. Drought, floods, cyclones, pest attacks, and so on and so forth. But the PM Fasal Bima Yojana, which we thought that the allocation under this head will be improved, and the scheme itself should be further improved. There is need for reform. The allocation this year is only 16,000 crore of rupees as against 15,695 last year. So even to de-risk agriculture, to minimize the risk in agriculture for the farmers, I think no substantial improvement or effort has been made in this. Another important scheme is PM Krishi Sichai Yojana, irrigation kind of thing. So this year, it is 4,000 crore of rupees, which is at the last year's level. And what you find again in the last year's revised expenditure, it was as low as rupees 2,563 crore. So on the one hand, we say per drop, more crop. Every khet will have irrigation facility. And we see this kind of focus on irrigation. This is really unfortunate. At least particularly, I feel bad because I've been all through praising this government on their focus on agriculture and all that. But this year, I think I'm really disappointed. PM Kisan Sampada Yojana is another very important scheme, which is important from the point of view of promoting food processing sector. And they say will create infrastructure for, or even the new farm laws. One of the objectives is to promote food processing, and that's why there is so much of concession for the food processors that and government will not intervene even if they are hoarding or speculating or whatever they are doing for local trading or exports, whatever. So under the Essential Commodities Act, that was one of the things. But here you find even for this, the allocation has been slashed from rupees 1,081 crore last year to rupees 700 only this year. And the actual expenditure also last year, it was only 750 crores. So I don't know what really we are doing. Then we have Manrega, the flagship scheme we have seen. Every year, in fact, they say there will be some kind of tinkering, and I feel bad, but also because when I was hearing the budget discussion or debate, and in which the chief economic advisor and also the principal advisor in the finance ministry, they participated. They say our focus is now different. We don't believe in doles. So as if some of these programs are doles, and they believe in investment-driven, high-profile infrastructure-led growth, and that will take care of poverty. And Professor Dubey in the morning was talking about inequality that they have not mentioned. They are clearly mentioning, sir, that that is not our focus. Their focus is basically how this kind of investment-driven or market-driven growth and through infrastructure development will create growth, which will reduce poverty, not necessarily inequality. They not talk about inequality because that in which they don't believe. They don't believe. This present regime and particularly their advisors, they don't believe in this. So as a result, we don't expect that this kind of thing will really come into discussion. Manrega, as I said, and also Gram Sadak Yojana, I think even PM Awas Yojana, we always saying that the construction sector, housing sector will revive, which will create a lot of employment both in rural and urban areas. But this is the fate, that allocation remains at last year's level at 19,500 crore, and there is no change. And in the case of Manrega, there was some improvement last year, but again it has been slashed to 73,000 crore only. So based on some of the important schemes, I don't see any sign that I think the government is really addressing the kind of demand push issue what we have been discussing so far. They don't believe in that. They say these are all doles. So they are not going to do it this way anyway, at least that is the stand they are taking. And also we find that every year in the budget some new schemes will be announced, irrespective of whether these are actually implemented or not. As Professor Dubey also was mentioning in the morning that we should see what we have been saying and doing in the last few years in terms of allocating funds, whether utilizing or implementing these schemes or not. At least for most of these schemes, I think there is no sign that they are really implementing it. For example, the Union Budget 2018 and 19 promised that there will be price deficiency payments in case the market prices fall below the minimum support prices of any agricultural commodity. The government will intervene and procure and try to stabilize the market. But they have never even tried to implement it. In fact, when I was in Niti Aayog, at least there was some discussion how to institutionalize this involving APMCs and also some traders and cooperatives and all that. But even that discussion is not there anymore. So I think that is one. Secondly, we also said that there will be upgradation and a strengthening of existing 22,000 rural huts, because in the villages you will find farmers have to go 40 kilometers, 50 kilometers, 60 kilometers to sell their produce if they have to go to an organized market for sale. There is no way they can afford the transportation cost. They're all small farmers. And even if they, so there was a suggestion even by the Swaminathan committee that this kind of infrastructure should be created, regulated markets or wholesale markets within a radius of 5 kilometers or so. And also, as I said, in the last 2018-19 budget, it was suggested that at least the existing huts, weekly huts and all these are there. So if they are upgraded and integrated with wholesale markets, both electronically and otherwise, some of the farmers, at least if they are organized as cooperatives or FPOs, they will have increased access to market and get better prices. But there is no sign that they have even initiated this kind of thing anywhere. Operation Green for strengthening FPOs, agri-logistics, processing facilities, etc. for perishables like tomato, onion and potato. This year they have said, but again, nothing has happened. And this year again in the present budget, they say this will cover, the Operation Green scheme will cover 22 perishable commodities. They could not even address the 3 commodities so far. They announced it in 2008. And now they say this year that 22 commodities will be covered, perishable commodities. So I don't know how they are going to do it. And also they said they will help the tenant farmers to access institutional credit. As you know the fate, even the normal small and marginal farmers, even some of the large farmers in eastern India, they don't get institutional credit. I think they have to depend on the private money lenders and traders. This year's budget, again, their new announcements is that apart from this 22 perishable products to be covered under Operation Green program, 1,000 more mandis will be integrated with INAM, they say. And modernization of 5 fishing harbors in Kochi, Chennai, Vizag, Paradip and Petwaghat, and also develop some inland fishing harbors and fish landing centers which will benefit the fishing communities. And also they talk about multi-purpose seaweed parks to be established in Tamil Nadu, especially. You know the region why, but anyway, I don't spell out, which can help promote seaweed farming by coastal communities to improve their incomes. And also they have said the micro irrigation fund, the corpus of it under NABARD will be increased from 5,000 crore to 10,000 crore next year. Finance Minister's speech also mentioned that agricultural credit target would be enhanced to rupees 6,000 16.5 lakh crore in 2022. They don't talk about 21-22. They talk about 2022. But anyway, even if it happens, I think it is good. But that does not, in practice, happen. As I said, in the whole of Eastern India and Northeast India, I think the farmers don't have access to institutional credit. And allocation for rural infrastructure development, they say, would be enhanced from 30,000 crore to 40,000 crore. It will be good if they do it. But one thing which they said probably to please the agitating farmers is that agriculture infrastructure fund would be made available to APMCs also for augmenting their infrastructure facilities. Because there is a general feeling that APMC mandis will be dismantled or nothing will be done for them. But at least this budget talks about it. I don't know whether they do it in reality, but at least they have talked, the finance minister has talked about it. The agriculture infrastructure fund will be made available to APMCs for augmenting their infrastructure facilities. This announcement should be reassuring that there is no intention of the government to either dismantle or weaken the APMCs. To conclude, I think the Union Budget 2021-22 has not probably met the farmers' expectations. In fact, the farmers' expectations, as I said, was high because the government promised to double their incomes by 2022. And also, I think a lot of things are happening to put them in distress. The unfavorable agricultural terms of trade, falling agricultural exports, not having institutional credit, and so on and so forth. But most importantly, at least we thought in order to boost effective demand in the economy for overall economic recovery, even to that they have not paid any attention. And agriculture rural development, everybody expected that that will be the engine of growth recovery in the years to come if they really pump money into the agriculture and rural sector. And unfortunately, this has not happened. I will stop here, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I mean, basically, the main point on which the entire presentation revolves is that the farmers' education is not on the question of the three legislations, right, but on the question rooted in the general crisis in the agriculture sector. Right. And he has brought out how this crisis prevails and that the measures taken are either inadequate or non-existent to deal with this crisis in the budget, except some promises made, which if fulfilled can go some distance towards mitigating this crisis. Now I give the floor to Professor Govinda to speak on education and in general on the general budget if he likes. Professor Govinda. कहाँ हैं गोविंदा साहब?
He was, he's here.
Yeah. Thank you, Professor Dubey, and thank you, Dr. Nityananda, and all others who are here. It's a great opportunity for me to share some views. As we know, this budget was presented as a historic budget. I think it is historical in a way, at least when we come to education, because in the history of this country, this is for the first time that the education budget has been slashed to this level. It has never happened. Always we have never been happy with the allocation that was made to education, but it was never slashed in the way it has been slashed this time for education. From that point of view, I think it is a historic budget for slashing education. There has been a reduction of about 6,000 crores from last year's allocation to this year's 5,000 crores. School education itself has suffered 5,000 crores reduction has come for that. Now, why this is important to really mention here is that we have been talking about distress situation in the economy, but I think we are in a real distress situation in education in this country. For the last 1 year, schools and colleges have been closed. The world over, all relief packages have really highlighted the problem of education and provided special allocation for education all over the world. But in India, we have chosen to reduce allocation for education, which is a very strange phenomenon that I find not found anywhere else in the world under this pandemic condition that we are going through. I was looking at in terms of the total, if we you see the total budget, if you look at the overall sum has increased. And it used to be last year, the school education share in the total budget used to be 2.18%. And this year it has come down to 1.74%. So it is not only about 5,000 crore, doesn't fully represent our lowest priority for education. If you look at in terms of school education proportionately to what we are spending overall, our budget allocation and what the school education gets, it is even more significantly reduced. And I was also looking at some analysis done by the Center for Child Rights about budget allocation for children budget. They have tried to really do it, which used to be going back in 2012-13, which used to be 4.76% of the total budget, used to be child budget, child-related, child protection, child education, and all of them used to be together, child nutrition and others. But this from 4.76 in 2012-13, consistently it has come down during all these years, and now it stands at only 2.46%. The child budget, if you look at whatever allocation that is made for child, which includes education, nutrition, and protection, altogether it has come down to only 2.46%. This is why I'm highlighting this reduction, is that with this reduction in the budget for education, attention being paid to education, whatever gain we had got during the last 10, 15 years, whatever it may be, that in terms of enrollment and provision of infrastructure is going to collapse this year. Everyone was expecting that there will be increased allocation for education to make up for the loss that has happened, because what is happening, if we look at in terms of the centrally sponsored schemes allocation uptake, that is what money has been transferred to the state governments for this, because we all know that in school education particularly, states have come to depend so much on the centrally sponsored scheme of Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan, Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, and then Madhyamik Shiksha Abhiyan and all. They only put in whatever comes from the central government, for that they put in the counterpart funding. That is what has happened. But if you look at in terms of the, normally after the revised budget, revised estimates, the uptake goes up significantly. And normally around 75% in December, you will find that the expenditure of the MHRD would be there because they transfer money to the state governments. This year, this has been less than 60% has gone toward the end of the year. Now, that means that there has been already a lot of lag in terms of the allocation that has been received by the state governments for school education under the centrally sponsored schemes. And now we are reducing it also further. I think it will have a very, very serious implication for what is happening. Because we should also appreciate what is happening at the state level because of the pandemic, is that there has been no teacher recruitment for the last 1 year. And therefore, there have been a lot of positions which are vacant, which they are not likely to fill in. And second, I think the maintenance of infrastructure, school infrastructure, for the last one year has been in very miserable shape. There has been no maintenance that has happened. The schools are in very bad shape. When the schools reopen, people were expecting that there will be a package that would be there for rehabilitation of the post-pandemic rehabilitation of the children in the school with improvement in the school infrastructure and all. But unfortunately, nothing such has happened. And I think this is the second point that I want to make. Third, there are a few things. Like we find that the one area in which the additional allocation has come is for the midday meals. The midday meals has received around 500 crores more. But this is also in a way deceptive. I should tell you, because we keep hearing every day about the serious condition of malnutrition among the children, and India not able to really make up for that at all. And if we, alongside midday meal, you should also look at I should say that this year the midday meal expenditure has gone down very significantly because the schools have not been able to distribute midday meal. Although it was said that the midday meal should be given to the children even if the schools are closed, this has not happened. In state after state, the midday meal has not been distributed. So this 500 crore increase is a bit deceptive from that point of view. Second, if we combine this with what has happened with respect to ICDS, I think it is very important since we are talking about nutrition. This budget actually combines two schemes. One is the Poshan Abhiyan scheme and the ICDS. They have been merged this time. Earlier, it was launched earlier. Poshan Abhiyan scheme, what is Poshan 2.0 had been launched. Now this has been now merged with this. Now, what is the allocation that has come is that last year we had 3,400 crores for the Poshan Abhiyan and 19,412 crores for ICDS. But what has now come for the merged scheme is only 19,916. In effect, we have slashed 4,000 crores towards nutrition of children. If we combine ICDS and then Poshan Abhiyan, which again is a very, very serious issue because this will have an impact on the primary education. Because the more we don't protect the preschool level prior to primary level, I think this will have a direct impact on this. I won't take much time, sir. There are 2 or 3 schemes which have come, which I think I should really comment on. One is the 15,000 exemplar schools. This is in a way a rehashing of the model school idea which had been earlier done. Now 15,000 schools, but the point is that this there are no details about 15,000 exemplar schools, how it will be done. This is going back to what Professor Dhar was pointing out. Earlier we used to have the planning commission 5-year plans, and therefore the schemes used to be worked out, and then the annual allocation used to come, budget allocation used to come towards the scheme that are there in operation. Now actually there is no way to really know what is the thinking of the government at all. So this is the new thinking that has come to start 15,000 exemplar schools. They are called exemplar schools, model schools. What is going to happen, we don't know. This may be another way of public-private partnership, which was floated during the UPA time also. I am afraid what is going to come, we do not know about that. A second program that has been said for which additional allocation that has been made is about Eklavya pattern model residential schools, for which it has been said that there will be 750 such new schools will come up. But unfortunately, if you look at, this is not a new scheme. This is an older scheme, for which already money had been allocated. But I was looking at the website of the ministry, and ministry says that out of 500 schools that have been allocated earlier, only 173 have been operationalized till now. I do not know what exactly we mean by adding another 750 schools. Are we going to really take that part of it which has not been operationalized and include here, or this is additionality? How we want to do, why it has not been done? Earlier, again, Planning Commission used to really evaluate in terms of seeing if schemes are working or not and how it should be done. But there are no indications in terms of why this has been done when the previous scheme is not functioning at all. This is another issue that I want to point out. Third, I think a scheme which has been announced, which is a new scheme that has been announced now, which bothers me, is about opening of 100 Sainik schools. Why it bothers me is that I think a little bit of history I should share with you here, that the idea of Sainik schools was mooted in 1961 when Krishna Menon was the defense minister. And it was thought that the idea of a Sainik school is that Sainik schools will be something like a training ground for people who, those who move out of the Sainik schools can have a better access to the National Defense Academy. That was originally thought of. It was was meant for people, who would. So there is a special kind of a mental and physical training that would happen in the Sainik schools. This was in 1961. Between 1961 and 2021, that is in the 60 years, how many schools have come? 34 schools have come. I'm saying all these things because from NIPA we had evaluated the Sainik school a few years ago, and the defense ministry was very keen on reorganizing the schools. And the importance given to this is very high within the defense ministry. And for every Sainik school, which are only 34, the GOC in command, in the local command, chairs the board of management of that school. That's the kind of importance given by the defense ministry to each of these Sainik schools. Now we say we are going to open 100 schools. I don't know why suddenly such love has come from 34 to 100 more schools. I am not too convinced of this sudden love, how it has come. I do see some other consideration that must be there. Second, what bothers me even more is that this is going to be taken out of the defense ministry, and it will be done as collaboration with non-governmental organizations. It bothers me. Something which has been very well protected, because it can affect our security issues also. It's a very, very serious issue. I hope more people will really reflect and write on this, that this could really threaten. If 100 schools are created with the NGOs' hands, and NGOs, we don't know what kind of NGOs that they will get, which can really lead to creating children who will be trained and oriented in parochial considerations, and who will enter into the defense forces in course of time. If this is the way they are really looking at, I think it bothers me that not only about sudden love for 100 schools, which raises questions, but also that this will be handed over and done through public-private partnership and non-governmental organizations, which is a very serious issue. Why open up defense sector suddenly in this fashion, in training people in this fashion, which has not happened during the last 60 years? It is a serious issue. I would also like to add here that the Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao, which has been launched and then projected in a very big way during the last few years. Now, this has been merged now again. You see, this is the problem with many of these schemes, is that quietly you forget them and then leave them out. Now, the Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao Andolan, like the Poshan Abhiyan being merged with ICDS, this is being merged with something called Shakti. That's a scheme that is already there. This is being merged with that. And if you look at in terms of what has happened to this during the last few years, for only 45% of the money allocated to Beti Bachao was really sanctioned and spent by the government of India. And that is why I'm saying this, that while we talk about the school education, girls' education, and all these things, so much we talk about women empowerment and everything, but what has really happened is that we have really reduced all these things, merged them, neglected them, sidelined them, the schemes that have been launched for that. I'll just take 2 minutes to tell about two things about higher education. There's not much to say about higher education, sir. In fact, higher education, besides the fact that 1,000 crores has been launched, there has been nothing new that has been said. Three things that have been. One is actually they have recycled, this budget recycles ideas which had been floated a few years earlier. The two themes that have been brought back is the Higher Education Commission and the National Research Fund. We should remember that this was already in 2019 also it has been referred to, but nothing had happened. And Higher Education Commission was also referred to several times earlier, but nothing has happened. But National Research Fund this time has been allocated such a huge money, some 10,000 crores has been allocated, which would appear very, very impressive. Many people, scientists have said that, no, it's a great idea that, we are supporting research and all. But the problem, if you read the fine print, is that this money has been allocated over a period of 5 years. It's not for this year. And we have found actually in the previous plans, previous budgets also, whatever has been allocated for a long-term expenditure, that doesn't take off seriously in the initial years. So I am not too sure that anything will happen under this research fund also this year. And since it is over 5 years, it has been done, and that also means that the expenditure pattern has not been worked out yet. Allocation pattern has not been worked out yet, and the norms of granting has not been. I think it's 50,000 crores for NRF has been provided. So that is what has happened. Now there is one new scheme that has been suggested is the umbrella structure at the city level for central organization that will be created. But this also, there are no details that are given, and all that the government of India seems to be interested in spending is what they call the glue fund, which is what the budget document is talking about. Otherwise, there is nothing new. We have cut down 1,000 crores and nothing new that has happened, which essentially means that we have abandoned the higher education sector almost completely to the privatization, private forces. This is the very clear indication that is coming out by the slash that has happened to higher education in this budget. Last point that I want to make is that, with lot of fanfare, a few years ago in 2017, we had launched what is called the Higher Education Finance HIFA. Agency, Higher Education Finance Agency. And it was announced that, from now onwards, all the institutions will have to really take money from the Higher Education Finance Agency, and we will not give any grant. They will be in the form of loans and from the agency, which will be equity-based support will be given by the central government for them. But what has happened now, by 2021, we have realized that this is a failed effort. There has been the money that has not gone up. The universities have not really heeded this, and they have not been able to borrow. And all that the government is going to do now is to really pay for the interest on the loan that they had taken. And if you read the budget details, all those things, that is what we find that what is being allocated for various agencies is that towards the interest that the government of India is going to clear. So I am afraid that the higher education, the government of India doesn't seem to be even thinking about higher education, what to do. Higher education, like school education, even more so higher education, in such a state of crisis. And all that we seem to be talking about is only about IITs, IIMs. We have increased the allocation for this. We have increased the allocation for central schools and then Navodaya schools. Government of India seems to be thinking their responsibility is only about their own institutions, not about the education sector of this country, but only about their own institutions which are directly controlled by Government of India is Government of India's responsibility. I think it is a very serious issue. We need to, the government of India has to own the education system of this country and think about improving the education system of this country. Budget should really relate to all these things, not just about increasing allocation for central schools, the Navodaya schools, central universities, and then IITs and IIMs, which are under direct control of the government of India. These are the few points that came to my mind. Sir, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you very much for the detailed presentation. And now I turn to Professor Rama Baru, who would be speaking on, a component of the budget which has been most widely publicized. So let's try to be wiser on that. Professor Rama Baru.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nityanand, Dr. Muchkund Dubey, and CSD for inviting me to speak. The advantage I have is I have very closely listened to all the speakers in the morning, and I'm going to just focus on health, but in the overall context of the remarks made on the budget. Firstly, I want to say, yes, as Mr. Dubey said, there's a lot of hype around the increase on health, but I think there are many smoke screens which I will try to sort of address as we look through what is actually happening in the health sector. With the COVID pandemic, I think we faced a huge humanitarian crisis. We faced a huge healthcare crisis. It was very clear through the COVID pandemic that it was the public sector's responsibility to take care of all the needs. The private sector basically absolved itself of any responsibility, and the government did not really act to either nationalize private sector during the pandemic. Significant. So you had a weak public sector which responded, in my view, quite admirably, especially client health workers, and with adequate protective measures. We know all those stories. So in that context, you would have expected that, and this is a global issue that is being raised, that the public sector investment is absolutely critical in future, not just about the pandemic, that the pandemic actually showed us the fault lines, and this could have been addressed through a very robust investment in the health services. Now 137%, as Praveen Jha and even Bishwajit Dhar had mentioned earlier, it, to me, is a smoke screen, because it is actually bringing in water supply, sanitation, and health services into one big pool. And in that, there are many different funding sources that are being brought in to show this, what is a very dramatic increase. If you only look at health services, and this was again commented by many commentators on the budget, it's only 11% increase. And if you take in inflation of, say, about 6%, in real terms, you're really talking about a 5% increase. The important point that Praveen made, which I think is very important, especially when it comes to health, is the opacity of the budget, because you are sort of conflating a whole lot of sources of funding, and we are not quite sure from the budget figures what is coming from where. I also want to say what Dr. Govind Rao said was very, very important, because the nutrition budget should also be seen in relation to the health budget. So because we know that stunting in children is still very high, nutrition support for children and mothers through the ICDS is very critical. But the point that he makes is that with this merging of Poshan Abhiyan and ICDS, you actually see a slashing of funds. So these are the smoke screens I'm alluding to, because I think when you say, oh, fantastic, we've done 137%, and we can be applauded for that, I'm sorry, we cannot be applauded. I also see this budget in a longitudinal sense, because I think the budget itself, to me, is quite insignificant. What we need to see is that the efforts for the pre-budget in the last 1 year has been towards more privatization of health services. If you look at the 15th Finance Commission recommendations, if you look at it in relation to the Niti Aayog's proposal for the health sector, and if you look at the kind of the high-level group that was set up by the PMO for health, they are all moving towards greater privatization. They are talking about public-private partnerships in the health sector. Now, in all of this 11% increase is for the health and wellness centers. It is for setting up labs. Now, I will come to that a little later, but what is important for us to understand is the health and wellness center investments are necessary for the project of public-private partnerships. I'll give you one example. The Niti Aayog subcommittee on medical education has made it very clear that they're going to privatize medical education. They're going to elicit private finance into medical education. But the private medical colleges require hospitals for training of their doctors. And what they are proposing is that district hospitals will partner with private medical colleges to provide a public-private partnership, and the private medical college will actually redefine the role of the district hospital. So, I mean, if those of you are interested, that document is very, very important. So this is one. The other is a lot of the curative services are being talked about in a PPP mode. the 11% increase, which minus the inflation, etc. What is going to happen to employment, increased employment and secure employment for our health workers? If you look at in most states today, it is all contracted out. Doctors contracted out, contracting in. So the doctors, the health workers, the ashas, everybody is being pretty much in a contract mode. So with the 11% increase, you're not going to be able to really build the human resources in health in any significant manner. The other very interesting aspect of this budget, again another smokescreen, is that the government of India has already gone in for loan negotiations with three very important international bodies. One is the ADB, the second is the World Bank, and the third is the Gates Foundation. And if you look at all the loan agreements for these, this happened in the 2020, from July onwards. They are all addressing strengthening urban health systems, strengthening preventive care, and strengthening the setting up of these laboratories, the public health laboratories, the surveillance. So it's very interesting. The statement from the budget speech of the finance minister is actually a direct quote from the World Bank document on what are the areas that require strengthening. So to me, this is another smokescreen in the sense that we are, as a continuation of the 1991, let's not forget 1991, we are actually moving into the health sector with a loan financing system. So, this the actual spending of the government on the health sector becomes more and more questionable. The other very important aspect, which I do believe is important, is that the private sector, both the drug industry as well as the hospital industry, has been pushing the government for subsidies for themselves, but more importantly, that they want a very strong public sector infrastructure, so which they can use when they feel that their resources are dwindling or their profit margins are falling. So I find that this really, the budget is to me a very clear departure in another stage, taking privatization to the level. It requires the health and wellness investments, because for all preventive care, no private sector is going to come to do that. If you want to ensure mass vaccination of your population, no private sector, the private sector will come in at a cost where people will have to pay. But the actual mass vaccination programs will have to be done by your frontline workers in the public sector. So it's all the areas where the private sector will not be willing to come in are being now invested in. But that investment is not only the government investment, and that is the point I want to make. The other very important aspect of this budget is the increased water supply and sanitation. And if you look at the water supply and sanitation, it has right from the beginning, including the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, has been an avenue for private investment to come in. The public sector it's not as if you're building a comprehensive system of waste management and other things, but you're opening up for technology to come in. Now, this is another very important area where the government is soliciting public-private partnership, both in health and in allied areas, which is the use of technology to come in. So whether it's telemedicine or it is bringing in technologies to clean up your environment or to do other things, you're really opening up spaces for not only national, domestic private capital, but you're actually opening up to global private capital. And I think these are the kinds of trends that I see and the many smoke screens that exist in this process. Now, for example, let's take the development of our vaccine. You have, one last thing is that this whole scheme is being called Atmanirbhar Swasthya, PM's Atmanirbhar Swasthya Yojana. The Atmanirbhar is not about more of public sector or more of public investment, but that Atmanirbhar is to facilitate the greater privatization, which has already been designed for over the last 2 years. So, in a sense, to me, the COVID pandemic has not touched the government in any moral or in an ethical way. It has not really addressed the needs of the health sector adequately. There is great opacity in the budget figures, and therefore, I think the budget figure are not the important things. I think we need to look at the trends that have emerged, the ways in which the government has responded. And I think one of the earlier speakers had mentioned the budget exercise itself in that sense does not have the same importance that it used to have in earlier times. And it's really a tragedy that the nutrition budget has been dealt with in the way it has. So I'll stop here. I know we have sort of exceeded our time. And if there are any specific questions, I'm happy to take it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We were planning to have at least half an hour for question and comments, but we don't have the time. But I would still try to, with your permission, extend it for at least 15 minutes. So, and then I would request the people who are going to ask questions to confine themselves to asking questions, and at this stage, not to make comments of their own. We would very much like to hear all of you, but you know the time constraint. So, now anyone who would like to ask questions from the floor? I say that everybody is looking forward to lunch. So shall we then conclude? Akhil?
Yeah, I have no specific.
I want to ask something.
Yes, Sushmita.
Yes, Sushmita, go ahead.
Recognizing that this is a really difficult time, I look forward to some solutions or suggestions from the speakers, like what could have been done in this difficult situation so that things would be better.
And I would also like to make an intervention. It's not a question. I mean, till last year, Professor K.B. Saxena used to speak on social sector development schemes and budget. He's not, he didn't join us today. It has been quite well established, Professor Praveen Jha, because he works on budget, but he knows. I mean, for last 15-16 years, this SCAP, Schedule Caste subplan and tribal subplan, they have never been allocated money in proportion to what they should have obtained. And the trend has continued in this budget also. In fact, the Honorable FM didn't even mention these SCP and TSP in her plan. And interestingly, one very important scheme pertaining to post-metric fellowship to SCs and ST students, the scheme has been grappling with low or inadequate budgetary allocations for past many years, and allocations haven't been increased yet. And in a very characteristic fashion, they have allocated 35,000 crore rupees for a period of next 4 years. I mean, in union budgets, we used to read allocations for one financial year. They have allocated it for next 4 years without mentioning how will that money be spent. And the most important issue pertaining to MoMA, this Ministry of Minority Affairs as well as Ministry of Tribal Affairs, is non-spending of the money that has been allocated to these departments and ministries. And if we see the actuals that have been released for the year 2018-19, the trend has been continued. So, the previous governments as well as this government for past 6 years, they don't look serious for any efforts to bridge the development gap between SCSTs and other general social groups. This is all.
Now, I think that relating to Sushmita's question, in the overall context, what should have really been done is to, make provisions for demand stimulation. And I would request Biswajit to elaborate it a little bit, and if necessary, then Professor Jha.
Yes, I think we have to see what could have been done, and in my intervention, I tried to focus on some of these points, because all the colleagues in the panel have mentioned about how expenditure has been slashed in extremely critical areas, right from education, health, agriculture, you name it. I think there has been a slashing of expenditure by the government. So that's why I was actually mentioning, I didn't want to elaborate, because I knew our colleagues are going to be mentioning about, giving the details. That, all this hoopla about the government spending and everyone looking at the fiscal deficit to say that, there has been a big push by the government. This sounds absolutely ridiculous. To say the very least, because what the government has actually done is that it has frittered away resources to areas or to in areas where it is absolutely not desirable. It has actually not garnered resources from where it should have actually done this, and at the end of the day, we are having a situation where sectors which are absolutely imperative for focused attention, is if this economy has to go anywhere forward out of this pandemic, those have been completely left to the mercy of I think cronies. Now that is something that has to be highlighted here. Now, I was, in the pre-budget, and I was actually doing an exercise. I was looking at 4 budgets, earlier budgets, which were presented after either a war, a conflict situation, or an economic downturn, and then started with the 58-59 budget of Pandit Nehru, which was after the economic crisis that the country faced, the 63-64 budget of Morarji Desai, 73-74 budget of Y.V. Chauhan, and 91-92 budget of Manmohan Singh. Now, in each of the budgets, and it was absolutely striking that all these budgets actually targeted either luxury consumer goods or those sections of the society who need to be taxed, and it had brought in that dimension. Now, it's incredible that this exercise, this entire budgetary exercise, instead of taxing those who should be, is actually giving concessions to those who don't deserve it at all. So I think this is the hallmark of the budget. And I think several speakers, Professor Haq, Professor Govinda, and also Rama, they mentioned this, that the objective function is really to hand over resources of the state to the cronies. And this is the budget making exercise all about. And this is what we have seen. So, it's difficult to say how you can fix fix a problem where the government is not intending to go in that direction. So it's like that proverbial saying that you can wake up a person who's actually sleeping, but the person who's actually pretending to sleep, how do you wake that person up? So the frustration today is that you have a government which is just not interested in going down the path that all of us are wanting the government to move. It wants to move in a completely different direction. So the task before us becomes even more difficult. So Praveen wanted to say something.
Sir, you have to unmute your mic.
Yes. It's okay, Nona. Okay. Just 2-3 points. The first obvious thing, this is in response to what Sushmita asked, is to acknowledge the problem. There is a problem, but as Professor Dhol said just now, if you want to be an ostrich, fine. I mean, what can be done? Now, the Financial Times of London, which is supposed to be one of the most, iconic spokesperson for right-wing economics, that said in early August that we have to change the way of doing what needs to be done in the context of the pandemic and so on, and talks of a lot of public sector investments, lot of things which generally economists associated with the left of center, highlight. That is, all of you should, those of you who are not familiar with it, should look at that FT editorial of early August. Right? So there is a hell of a lot that we know what needs to be done. Right? None of that was done. If anything, even this claim of additional expenditure, as I mentioned, is a definitional jugglery. Do you really think that the entire nation is a bunch of fools? They can't figure out what very basics are. Yeah. So what needed to be done, as has been emphasized repeatedly, is to step up all those processes, expenditures, etc., which revive demand, number one. Number two, to do all that, then you need resources. Yeah. And again, I think I follow in the footsteps of Bishwajit on this completely, that unusual times require, maybe unusual interventions. Even if you are steeped in this broader neoliberal orthodoxy and so on, at least acknowledge that this is a very difficult time and do some things. I'll give you only one example, and several countries have done this. Yeah, Argentina has several countries. Let me not, for lack of time, I will not get into the details. Can we think of at least a solidarity tax on those who can afford it? At least for 1 year, at least for 2-3 years. As per 2019 estimate, in India, the total wealth of the dollar billionaires is about 560 lakh crores. Think of 1% tax on their wealth, 5.6 lakh crores. If we assume that this wealth is being inherited, passing on generation to generation and so on, think of some percentage, 25, 30, whatever percent is appropriate for inheritance tax, something in the neighborhood of, let's say, your corporate tax or whatever, right? We are looking at a fabulous figure of 10, 12, 15 lakh crores. Why not? So, Sushmita and other young friends, it is important for us to recognize two things. That there is just no way. Given the kind of trap that this government is in terms of its thinking, its friendship with certain kinds of, people, so to say, that is out. Yeah. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
There is one question in the chat box for Professor Rama Baru. Madam, I think you have read the question. Would you like to respond to it?
This is this center state. I have replied on. We've been having a chat in the chat box. So,
okay.
There are two. I just want to highlight two more important issues as far as health is concerned. You see, there has been a gradual centralization of certain health schemes, and these have become very important populist programs and are being used in their elections, state elections. So, whether it's the Ayushman Bharat or many of the other cash transfer schemes that have been put in place for health, it's for hospitalization, etc. It has a certain populism which it creates, and you people actually feel. And this has been one of the important departures in the welfare sector as far as this government is concerned, that this plethora of populist programming and the depth and the height of which we cannot really understand, and how it actually in terms of governance spans out at the state level, is a very important issue. And if you look at the Finance Commission, if you look at it in relation to what the economic survey says, and you look at the budget, they're all out of sync. Because the 15th Finance Commission actually, says that you need to finance health much more. And the analysis done in the economic survey is actually a good analysis. But in the translation, so somebody I think in the morning said, so will his job be on the line? Because clearly you said it, Praveen. I think it's particularly exemplified in the case of health, right? So I'm just saying that really the center state issue is very important. To what extent does this government actually respect federalism? You saw the whole GST issue also, and that the states, as far as health is concerned, are actually in the red because they have battled the COVID pandemic with limited resources, and they are finding other ways to finance. So I think this is a very, very important issue.
I think there is one more question in the chat box. It is by Professor Vivek, I think Vivek Kumar. Professor Jha may like to respond to it. And the question is about, he is making a point that we all are talking about budget allocations that have been made in this union budget, but there has been a very little discussion on actual budgeting or actual expenditure. And the figures that have been released recently, they show a very deplorable picture. That is, the actual expenditure has been very low than what was allocated last year in the union budget. So, Professor Jha, if you would like to respond to this.
You see, I think I'll respond very briefly because we have really run out of time. Two things need to be noted. In general, the quality of expenditure, etc., is one very important concern. So you should not be looking only at the quantity. Number two, as it happens, for last several years, actual is more than the revised, which is more than the budget estimate is more than the revised, and then the revised is more than the actual expenditure. That always happens. Now, this time what has happened is essentially in some segments, some pockets, in fact, the revised was more than the budgeted. That we need to acknowledge. For instance, as has already been mentioned, Narega and so on and so forth. So yes, so it was unusual, and in that sense, but yes, we need to examine these estimates much more carefully, both for quantity and quality. Thank you.
Thank you. So we conclude now. I think we have now reached the outer limit of the time that we set. Thank you very much, all of you, for joining us and giving such a well-studied and detailed presentation in each area. A very, very enriching discussion, and we will try to bring out something within a couple of days. So thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, sir. Thank you
Thank
for
you very much, sir.
roping in this conversation, all of us. Thank you. It was lovely conversation.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Should we close the meeting, sir?
I think
Yes, because I think that we have in our part, Satyanarayan Katha, where we invoke the gods to come. And then at the end, there's a sentence that Sarve Devas Swasthanam Gacha. all you gods, you go back to your own place. Thank you.
So this time the gods are there in their places, sir. We don't have to go. We are just here. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.